Anyone can be a steward. Anyone. You, me. What matters is finding a way of stewardship that makes sense to you, that is accessible to you, that fills you up. Sometimes we find stewards in the community, and they inspire us where to go next. I'm Ivea Moore, and this is Be the Change, Stewardship in the Nature Journal community. And today I get to ask Bela about her stewardship work, and I'm so excited. Um, Thank you for being here with me, Bela.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about stewardship and chit chat with you.
Me too. Um, so there's a question that I realized only belatedly I wanted to ask people, and it's not on our list. What does stewardship mean to you?
Stewardship for me is being connected to the land, the planet, the beings on the planet, and all of the things that are around us, the air, the water, the fire, the whatever, the soil, and doing our best to work with it, um, not be our usual human selves and just overpower things. Um, so to take care of it, nurture it, help it flourish, and be, um, yeah, making sure that we're taking all of nature into account in our
Mhm.
day-to-day existences.
Love that, especially what you said about working with nature, not overpowering, but working with nature and helping it flourish. That really resonates with me. Thank you for sharing what stewardship means to you.
Yeah.
So my first official question is, could you tell me about yourself and um, where's home for you, and where all did you grow up, and what made you fall in love with nature?
So home right now is in Oakland, California. We've been here for third. Yeah. Well, I've been in the Bay Area since 1993, with a little bit of a sabbatical for school, for about 4 years. No, yeah, about 4 years. Um, and uh, and then I grew up in Southern California, in Irvine and Orange County area. Um, my first experiences with nature, the first memories I have are the first time we went hiking in Yosemite, and as a little kid, I used to do everything that my dad did, and so we went the first time we went to Yosemite. He hiked. Um, I don't remember which one is the lower one, but the either Vernal Falls or Nevada Falls, barefoot. And because I wanted to be like my dad, I was about 6 years old and I hiked barefoot uh, up there with him, and it was fabulous. And I remember playing in the water at the top. I remember at the time we didn't know any better, but we were feeding the squirrels and the chipmunks. I think we had sunflower seeds or something with us, and they would come up and obviously they'd already been fed before, so we weren't the first ones to do it. Because they would come up and basically sit in your lap, and eat sunflower seeds with you. Um, and I have two sisters, and we would play with little stick dolls where we would make sticks with flower hats and petal dresses. And I just remember you know, playing dolls basically in the woods. um, and yeah, and I remember that just being like, I always loved our trips. We went to Yosemite every year. And then we went to Cabo San Lucas every year, so we'd go snorkeling and at the end of the water there. And yeah, so we at least twice a year we would be out in places, wild places that aren't necessarily, at least Cabo San Lucas isn't as wild as it used to be. But Yosemite is still, Yosemite was packed, but not quite as packed as it is nowadays also. So those are my early memories, but I've always been a collector of things. So I would always go to the park with my friends and bring home frogs and snails, and I'm sure my parents loved it and kept telling me, no, you can't keep it, you can't keep it. I brought home kittens, and I had a turtle as a pet. I mean, just I would just constantly bring things home, and they would have to tell me that I can't keep these things because they belonged out in the world. But I really wanted to make friends with them. And my friend and I grew up also near a stream, so we would, play with crawdads and um, all of those things, just constantly mucking around in mud and playing with nature.
That sounds like so much fun. Deciding that you're going to make friends with those animals, just come on home. And
Mhm.
it must have been hard, like having to let them go again. But I admire that you wanted to be their friends and that you wanted them to come be with you and you wanted that closeness with them. Um,
Yeah, well, I guess I mean, I still have, I mean, I think my entire life, after seeing, what is it, Snow White, or, she's singing and all these animals are coming over to her in the woods and they're all talking, or even, Cinderella, she had mice friends and, all these animal friends. And so for me, those were all, I related to those very much. I really wanted them to be my friends.
I never even put that together before, but you're right. Like a lot of the Disney films, at least the ones that I remember from when I was a kid too, like a lot of them were about being in nature or about the princesses becoming friends with nature. I never put together that could actually be a really kind of positive role model in terms of connecting with the nature.
Mhm.
I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
For me, it's Aurora who always comes into my head. Um, the one who
Which
be-
ones are?
she's the one who became the
Oh,
sleeping.
Sleeping Beauty. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just plus I loved her name, and I mean Aurora. How can you get more
Mhm.
royal than that? I, I loved it when she would dance through the woods, and all of the animals would be around her too. So I can
Yeah,
relate to you seeing Snow
yeah,
White with all the birds.
yeah.
That's that's so wonderful. And I haven't. I don't think I've ever been to the Yosemite waterfalls. So it sounds like it sounds wonderful just getting to play in the water after a long barefoot hike.
Mhm.
That's really, really cool. I have a lot of respect for that, especially because barefoot's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I just remember people walking over there and looking at our feet and going, "Your child is barefoot on a trail." And my dad's like, "Yep." But we used to also, because we lived in Southern California, there are these rocky piers at the beach. And I used to hop those barefoot. So I mean, the soles of my feet were like, an inch thick. Like yeah, I was constantly barefoot and definitely had like much less fragile feet than I do nowadays.
That's wonderful. Getting to run around barefoot in nature
Mhm.
and then I have never been to Cabo San Lucas, or actually any sort of I've never been snorkeling at all. So I'm curious to know what's the world like underwater?
So, Cabo San Lucas, the first time I went in, I was like, I didn't, you see water, and as a kid, I was probably again like maybe eight or nine. You see the water and you're swimming along and you're like, all right, everything's fine. And then you put on a snorkel, and you go walk into the water, and there are just fish and life everywhere. And I literally took off the snorkel and ran out of the water. That was my first experience. I'm like, oh my God, there's so many things in there, and I can't see any of them when I'm in there. It terrified me that I was swimming with all of these things that could like rub up against my legs and I would never know what it was. um, and then when I went to school, because I went to vet school on the island of St. Kitts in the Caribbean, I became a scuba diver. So I learned how to scuba dive. And they have reefs, and there I wasn't. I got to be in the water and be with the aquatic life, and it's I don't know, it's the way it's just as miraculous as it is up here, except for it's you just happen to be breathing air underwater. It is so incredibly full of life, and it's all happening, below the surface, and you can't see it. You don't necessarily know it's there, and that scares a lot of people. Obviously, it scared me, but it's definitely, I don't know, it was an experience. We would snorkel the reef every day during like after school, and we'd interact with eels and octopus and lots of little cleaner shrimp, lots of fish. Yeah, and then one particular time, lots and lots of these little tiny walnut-sized jellyfish. Yeah, so I mean, snorkeling, scuba diving. It's a miraculous world under there too.
It sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen documentaries and visited aquariums, but I don't think it, I imagine it's not really, it doesn't quite capture the experience of being able to be there yourself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I mean, it's just like seeing I guess, an animal at the zoo versus, yeah, being out in the, huge field and seeing them free and just going about their business.
Definitely. And I love that you said, and I love that you went on to go to vet school, like that your love of befriending the animals continued and you nurtured it. And
Hmm.
it,
Yeah, and I think up until because I we had all the Curious George books, and I remember there's like a dinosaur book for Curious George, and so I wanted to be a paleontologist, I think, until I was like about 9, and then I went to a museum and saw a paleontologist in this little glass window looking at tiny bones under a microscope, and I'm like, no, I want to work with live animals. Yeah, and so I switched at around 9 years of age to live animals.
I like that. I like that you had that insight at that age of no, not live.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've always liked the natural history museums and all the cool bones and the idea of the adventure of archaeology and paleontology. But yeah, not for me.
Plus, as long as we're not like stealing random idols from random temples like Indiana Jones. Ugh.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Could you tell me about your stewardship work? I'd love to hear about your stewardship work.
Yeah, so I mean, before I knew about stewardship, as a something that people do and can go volunteer for, things like that. My uh friends and I would, do beach cleanups, which, you've done many a times and have nature drilled about. Excuse me. And I know that we went to the Albany Bulb one time and cleaned up over there, and all of us came back with just massive amounts of mostly plastic, and lots of straws. But there was also there was like a factory, like a chemical factory or some kind of factory nearby there. And so every once in a while, you'd just find these like pieces of plastic that looked like they were on laundry bottles, or um, yeah, but they were like really thick plastic, um, that you knew was being used by a large corporation to carry something in. So that was a bunch of the things that we found over there were just these weird, um, thick plastic, and we didn't really know what it was, or who owned it. We were trying to read labels, but they had been mostly washed out. Yeah, straws were a huge thing. There were lots and lots of straws. Um,
It's interesting to notice what you find more of and what makes more of a pattern. It tells us
mhm,
about our habits, I think.
mhm,
Like
yeah.
Like why straws on that particular, or like about what you noticed about the chemical company.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, we could, and we didn't go deep diving into the research because it was, for a friend's birthday. And so we went out after we cleaned up, we went and had food and things like that, and celebrated. But it would have been interesting to go back and, see if you can trail back to the company that uh, released that stuff.
that that is really cool. When all was that you went out and did that cleanup?
Mm, I'd have to look at my phone because I know I took some images, but it was just a couple of years ago. But well, that's not true because it had to have been right before COVID because we weren't wearing masks or anything. Everything's pre or post COVID now in terms of timeline. But yeah, I think it was right maybe a year or two before COVID.
That's so cool. And so this friend, their way of celebrating their birthday was to go do the beach cleanup.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to meet them. I mean, sorry, that's your friend. That's your friend. But seriously, like
Yeah.
that's like
I
I
mean, and she's very I mean, she's a um no plastics household. So she has a daughter who's 11 years old, and they're a plastic free household. So everything's mason jars and metal containers, and she tries to get as little plastic as possible. And we all know that any packaging or anything that we bring into the house that we have to bring out with us. Um, so it and she works for Stop Waste.
stop waste.
Yeah.
It's very
So yeah, and she's an educator, so she teaches I think fourth graders about trash and recycling and yeah, all that good stuff.
that's wonderful. Major props to your friend and her stewardship work, and major props to you for taking part in her stewardship,
Yeah.
doing
And
your.
and I think that yeah, and that was just definitely an eye-opening experience. I was really frustrated by the end. I'm like, well, I'm I have to admit to the fact that I'm constantly frustrated with humans. So I see I don't know. I don't want to bring this down, but like you see the plastic waste, and that's one thing, but you also see the animal, like how animals are treated, and it's almost as though that they're throwaway also, and that's heartbreaking to me. And so it's on a working in shelters, um it's it's I try not to judge, and everybody has their own story of why things are happening in a certain way for them, and I understand that not everybody can upkeep, um but yeah, some days are harder than others in terms of trying to keep that judgment at bay. And when you see and we're just picking up the trash that we can see on the surface, right, on the beaches. But what's in the water? What went down to the bottom, and what's being picked up by all of the creatures that are there. So yeah, that's why stewardship is important to me. Is because we're doing all of these things that are potentially harmful, and yeah, I'd like it to stop.
And what you were saying about what you've noticed from the animals after working in the shelters and seeing how just seeing how they've been treated like they're throwaway too.
Mhm.
It's a lot, and I don't think that's bringing it down at all. I think that you're being honest about your experiences and that you work directly with the victims of the people in the world who are careless with life.
Mhm.
That's real.
Yeah.
How long have you been working in the animal shelters?
Um, since 2000 and I think since 2010. Mm, no, because I think 2007. I want to say 2007 is when I started working in the field. When I became a veterinarian, I worked in a clinic, a private practice clinic for small animals, and they had a contract with a local shelter to bring in animals for exams. And I fell in love with that part. Like that was my favorite part. was seeing these guys come through and making sure that they got the treatment that they deserved. Um, and then when I left the private practice, I went to work in a shelter, and I did that for several years. Um, and then I got hired on as a medical director for another humane society, and I did that for a couple of years. And then I went back to doing relief work, um, and just have been like flitting around between shelters and places because it's not it's and yeah, it's a small world. There are a handful of shelter veterinarians in this area, and they kind of rotate between all of the local shelters. They get frustrated, and then they leave and they go to the next one, and then they get frustrated and they leave and they go to the next one, or something, or something else happens where they are no longer getting along with people. And Yeah, so uh, it's a constantly shifting platform.
Hear that. Would
Yeah.
would you consider your work with all of the animals in the shelters and as a veterinarian, would you consider that stewardship?
I mean, I kind of do. It's taking care of uh, animals that are part. I mean, that we made part of this land, right? So these are not animals that are native to this space. These are animals that we've introduced and then didn't do again um, human caused overpopulation, and that is pretty much across the United States. Human caused overpopulation of animals, and now we're dealing like all of the veterinary sheltering world is dealing with the effects of that overpopulation, and it's pretty uh, prominent in places like Hawaii, where it's an island, and so there's only a certain limited amount of space, and you can see when the animal overpopulation gets too much because it's hard to contain and control. Um, but That's pretty much. I mean, so an example is uh, in it was I want to say Puerto Rico, when Puerto Rico had all of the hurricane um, issues. So it wasn't just humans that were affected; it was animals that were affected. And they A team of veterinarians, veterinary technicians, and animal welfare folks went down there. They occupied basically a stadium, like a basketball stadium, and they made a mash unit spay and neuter clinic, and they were doing hundreds upon hundreds of spays and neuters for the population of animals who were there, so that they didn't have this huge um, overcrowding as people were trying to just get their homes together, and all of these intact animals were running around the island, and they were just going to breed in the area. They were going to decimate the local species. And so these volunteer, veterinary workers went in and just spayed and neutered, day in, day out for weeks, until basically everybody on the, island was spayed and neutered. And I consider that to be in a way, stewardship, and just trying to control the population so it doesn't decimate the local species.
I would agree with you. I consider that to be an incredible act of stewardship, of a way of preserving the biodiversity on the island.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I mean, and it's the same with shelters here. I mean, I work at Contra Costa Animal Services still. Excuse me, and on any when it wasn't COVID, on any given day there are about 400 animals on site per day. And then there are 10,000 animals that come through there per year. And I worked at Oakland Animal Services. They had about 6,000 animals per year, about 300 animals on site any given day. So every space is, and if you think about how many shelters there are in the Alameda County and Contra Costa County, um, to have that many animals uh, housed just in our local area on a day-to-day basis is just um, it's whopping. It's a huge mass, and that's happening all across the United States.
Thank you. And thank all of the veterinarians in your area for the work and all of the veterinarians over here too. Thank you for the work that you do looking out for these animals.
Thanks.
It's a huge
Yeah,
service.
I'll try.
I think you do great. I mean, I'm remembering a particular story where outside of the office you were using your superpowers when we were out. So actually, do you want to share that story? Just because I
Sure.
was that day.
Yeah. So we went to your stewardship site, your restoration site, in San Francisco, and we were there with Mark Simmons, and we were walking along, and we heard some crying, a little crying sound, and about 20 or 30 feet away, we could see a little tiny baby raccoon climbing up um, a really huge eucalyptus tree, and he was about 6 feet off the ground, and he was crying, and he kept falling off, and trying to climb back up, and so most likely his mom had been on top, and he just couldn't get to her because it was too high. And the eucalyptus tree was just right off the trail, so people, all these tourists and people were walking there, and they were taking photos and coming up really close to the baby, and the baby was getting really tired. Um, and crying at the base of the tree, and trying to climb up over and over again. And so you went to go contact one of the rangers, and to go meet them at the end of the trail. And then Mark and I assumed positions 20 feet away from 20 to 30 feet away from the tree on either side of the trail, and asked people to please just give the baby raccoon some time to um, hopefully get reunited with its mom. And about 15 or so minutes later, the mom came down from this little crook in the tree, way higher up, and came down, grabbed the baby, and was able to leave with the baby, because nobody was disturbing it and there weren't people around.
Thank you for that, for what you did that day. Um, I remember during that day I was going to take a video, and then you very rightly were like, we should back up further because otherwise we might be spooking the mom. And I hadn't realized that you were right. And so we backed up. And by making sure that, like, I feel like your knowledge as a vet and your knowledge of animal behavior gave you a certain, like, give you a strength and a knowledge that a lot of us don't have, to be able to say we need to be this distance apart and we need to give the baby time to reunite. And the rangers took forever to get there. No offense to the rangers, but they did. They took forever.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
quite a while before they got there, you and Mark had already solved it. You two had
yeah.
already made sure that the baby got reunited.
And the funny thing is, when the ranger finally walked up, she's like, I don't know that I would what I would have done in the situation. So I mean, I think we probably would have done the same thing, just with an additional person involved. Yeah. Um,
So
yeah. But it was heartwarming to know that they got reunited and she took off with the baby.
I feel the same way. That was so relieved. I'm really thankful you were with us. I remember freaking out because I didn't know what to do, and I froze up a lot. So I'm really, really thankful that you were there.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's I don't know, a big part. Like I feel like there is a very large disconnect between the knowledge, I feel like there used to be knowledge that was passed down, through the generations of how animals act in a certain area and what they do, and what you should do. And I don't, I feel like we're in such a urban environment now, and people don't think of nature as being in urban or in urban environments. And so there's a disconnect between that learning phase that kids, in non-urban settings would, maybe experience, but maybe not. Maybe they're still disconnected from nature, even though they're surrounded by nature. Um, they're within nature. Um, so I think it's cultural, or where we, a lot of our culture doesn't think of ourselves as being in nature, within it.
That's really true. And then that might affect our attitude towards when we live in a city and nature does come around. We
Hmm.
either treat it like a novelty or like a pest, depending on how we perceive.
Hmm.
I've been lucky to go to natural places as a kid, but I largely grew up here in the city. And so
Hmm.
as a result, there were some good times that I had where I was able to run around barefoot or play in mud or play in my nana's river, but it wasn't a thing that happened all the time. And so as a result, I feel like I lack a lot of that context that people who have grown up surrounded by nature might have. Um, I think that could be why it's so awesome when we go out nature journaling in groups, or when people go out in groups and you have a bunch of mixed knowledge, because
Hmm.
we each bring our bits of knowledge and then we can pass that along to each other in maybe ways that, like you said, like we would have done in the past where people passed it along. We don't have that now. And so I think that's why it's even more important to go experience nature in groups.
Yeah, yeah. Like the last adventure that we had, where we all walked up to the snails and the spider, little place, and everybody was just, they're so, I mean, everybody was coming from different perspectives, and throwing in, yeah, what they thought was happening, was just fascinating, just to see how everybody's minds work. And it's much more fun when you have all of those different perspectives being thrown in for the same, scenario, and a scenario where almost everybody else, like 90% of the people who were walking the trails there, wouldn't have even noticed.
True. They see you paying attention and they're like, wait, what?
Hmm. Hmm.
Plus then you get even more like of those good bonding memories, and then you can talk later on about, oh yeah, you remember that one time when, and then it just brings back all of these connections and positive memories that you have, instead of like people worrying so much about doom and gloom. You have this immediate happy connection with it, and then that's what gets you wanting to steward it more, is that like we protect those good times that we had together.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been up to any other stewardship work?
So I got my California naturalist certification. Um, Thank you. Which I was really excited about, last year. Um, and um, so with that, I started doing more projects in terms of restoration projects. And I did a habitat restoration in Wildcat, um, uh, Regional Park, and where we basically spent the entire day, or the entire time, taking out broom on the side of the path. There is, and that's where I learned about that device that you were using, the root pulling device.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first time I had ever used a weed wrench, and I'm like, why did I not know about this thing before? This thing is amazing. Um, yeah, and so we were just pulling broom out, like, all along this one path. Um, and I have well, so I've been back. So that was probably like a year ago that we pulled all of that along the trail. And Josh and I recently walked past there, and there's been a landslide in along the path, and it covered up like a huge portion of the path. I'm like, huh, I wonder if that's where we pulled the all of the broom. But it ended up being like just another, like, I don't know, 20 feet away or something. But just the thought of, the land changes. So you do all this restoration work, and then the land changes on its own in its own due time. And so you're doing this, in the temporary, in the now, but you don't know what's gonna happen in the then, and how it's gonna affect the future portion of it.
Very true. That, yeah, just like what you said about the land changing in its own time, and then you wonder how you're like, for example, by pulling up the broom, you could have been removing a generation of seeds that would have wound up in the seed bank, and then therefore
Hmm.
when the land changed in its own time again, then suddenly you get all these broom coming up years later.
Hmm.
By taking them out early, then it might give room for somebody else to come up through the seed bank instead.
Hmm.
Or there could be more broom under there, or you never know. Um,
Hmm.
or the broom could have like left behind nitrogen deposits in the area because of the nitrogen fixing properties of the roots.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's yeah. So it's also interesting, like not for so it's interesting restoration work at that moment, and then know every time I pass by there, I'm like, oh yeah, we worked on that site, but also seeing how the land changes over time and what happens to it, and how that space is affected by that land change.
Exactly. And I bet you will always remember that spot anytime you go by it
Hmm.
because you spent time there working there
Yep.
and belonging there for that. And so as a result, you'll always be connected to that spot no matter what else changes it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I recognize, I mean, even though a lot of there's broom pretty much all the way around over there, I recognize that one location because we worked there. So it has a deeper connection. Yeah.
Very cool. And props to you for going up against broom. Broom is difficult.
But that weed wrench, oh my gosh, like it made it so much fun. I'm like, rah! And getting those big roots out of the ground, yeah, it was just so satisfying.
It is. You get them and you're like, look
Yeah.
at
I
this.
mean, and there was one gentleman who was with us who was like, I mean, he was pulling out broom that was like the size of a tree, and he was like heaving them down the path. I'm like, wow, I'm the ones that I'm pulling are like just the little shrubs in comparison. But at the same time, every one of those is going to grow up into a tree. So we were all, again, it's like that whole niche of, we all contribute something, whatever is within our power. And yeah, it was a fun day.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Plus, the little ones can make a ton of seeds too. Sometimes
Hmm.
they get extra desperate because they're little and they're even more like, I really have to reproduce and die now. Whereas the bigger ones will be like, oh, I got time. I can make some leaves. But the little ones are like, no, all the seeds right now. So major props. Sounds like a really fun. Way too excited about this. I'm gonna join in.
And then the other place that I worked was the Pinole, Point Pinole area. They are creating butterfly habitats along certain parts of that park. And so I helped work on part of the butterfly habitat, and that was really fun too.
That's wonderful. Talking about planting host plants and nectar type plants, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it was great because the folks that were leading it, you could point at a plant and go, so what is that? I haven't seen this one before. What is this? And then they would know all about it and where it's supposed to be planted, and let you know if you should plant it on the sunny side or on the more shady side, where the water was going to run off, things like that. So it was very again, I did, I think I took photos of the plants. I don't think I didn't nature journal that day. And so I just have the photos to rekindle that day as well. Um, yeah, so I think that's, I mean, besides what I do for work, just working on the restoration project. Oh, and then in back to the animal world, I'm also volunteering with Lindsay Wildlife, and so help again. I'm learning. For me, I'm learning about the species, the local species, um, which ones are native and which ones are not native, and also what they are affected by in terms of whether it's human or other animal related injuries. So I get to personally learn about different species, how they are medically managed, but also all of the influences of humans on them. And then that's what I've been working on nature journaling about, is trying to convey the those things in a really, again, try not to be judgmental, trying to be nice about it, but trying to convey the things that are affecting the local wildlife population and things that we can do if certain situations come up.
Wonderful. And so Lindsay Wildlife, are they, what kind of work do they do with the animals?
So they get sick, injured wildlife that comes in, and everything from birds, mammals, amphibians, reptiles. Is that everything? Yeah. um, and they have to make decisions about whether or not that animal could be released back into the wild. And if so, then fixing, giving them enough time to rehabilitate and fractures to heal, and turtle shells to reform, um, and any injuries to heal, and then they will release them if they think that they can survive back out in the world. But they don't want them suffering out, they don't want to release them only to suffer out there. So they have to be releasable. And for example, the recent storms that have hit us, all of the rain and wind knocked like just tons of squirrels' nests and birds' nests out of trees. And so Lindsay had just tons of squirrel and baby bird foster homes and care homes, taking care of them. And also at some point, baby possums were coming in, and by the possum load. um, so there were, and luckily they have, a certain amount of fosters. There's never enough foster homes. But uh, yeah, they have folks taking care of these guys, and once they are releasable, they will let them go back to where, they try to get the location where they got them from, so that they could go back to where they came from.
That's incredible work. And because you know that you're not going to be able to keep the animal at home forever, you're getting them well enough so that they can go back to the wild. That's a whole other level of like consideration that they have to let them go. You will have to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe
And I mean, because people, they're it's problematic when people take them in and don't rehab them appropriately, and they get acclimated to humans. That becomes problematic. So they have to do it in a way where they still have a healthy fear of humans. So they're, once released into the wild, they're not just approaching humans to be fed. So it's a fine balance. It's a very fine balance.
that's incredible work. That major props for doing that. And I can't even imagine how complicated it must be, but I respect it so much, and I'd love to learn more about it sometime. So I think
Yeah,
that's
and I mean, I'm learning. Like I'm just learning. They're you know, I'm uh now beginning, as long as I'm supervised, I can, handle the mammals. But the birds, I'm still I usually just watch them handle them, because the birds are a little bit more, number one, they can be more dangerous, especially the raptors. And number two, yeah, you just have to make sure that all the proper uh, techniques and everything. So I'm not even fully versed in that. And the medicine, for me as a veterinarian, the medicine is just different. Where they give medications is different, how they give medications is different, how much they give medications. And then, for every, you have to know the species, right? And so when you get all these fledgling birds in that just look like, little fluff balls with beaks, You're like, what is this? It could be a mockingbird, it could be a pigeon. I have no idea. I know it's not a hummingbird. I know what those look like. but um, but yeah, like and they all have different food needs, right? So you have to know what to feed them, because if you have a insect insectivore versus a plant and a vegetarian, you have to know which food to feed appropriately. Otherwise, you could potentially harm them.
That makes a lot
Um,
of sense. I was
yeah, or a nectar feeder like a hummingbird. You have to have different styles of feeding per animal.
exactly, if they're a nectar feeder like a hummingbird, you can't go giving them seeds and expect that they're going to be all right.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm learning a lot. I'm taking lots of notes. um, and yeah, and I try to just help where I'm able without like, because there's so much I don't know. Um, that's the other thing that's amazing, is that we all went to vet school. We all had the same lectures, but we all went in very different directions in terms of, people who work in large animal or small animal or wildlife or zoo medicine. Those are all completely different um, sets of skills. Um, and it's fascinating to see, um, yeah, and just see what the other veterinarian is doing, and not insinuating myself into that space, because I know that I don't know.
That- I just think that's really, really neat that you have people with so many different, like, diverse knowledge of this field, because this field is bigger than an outsider could imagine. So
Mhm.
that must be a really, really neat experience, just getting to see everybody with their own strengths and teaching each other that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and the I mean, it's not just the veterinarians, the technicians that work there, all of the staff that work there. They have, I mean, they've developed these incredible skills, and they're doing magical things with it
It's wonderful.
under very underfunded conditions.
Yeah, that sounds about right. One of the richest communities, the whole entire Bay Area, and yet some of the causes, a lot of them that need it the most don't have enough.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so you say you've been taking notes and learning, and would you consider what your note taking to be nature journaling?
I mean, now I would. Before it was just note taking. But now, seeing, I mean, it's observation of what's happening. It's the taking down of lists of species, and the things that affect them. Um, yeah, so I would, and I usually, for myself, um, if I'm going to be nature journaling, I kind of do like a theme for the day. Um, so that I can stay focused, because there's so many different possibilities of things to um, try to grab a hold of, in terms of what to express in a nature journal. Um, but yeah, so I usually try to stick to a theme, and then uh, try to figure out a way to convey uh, that theme without necessarily discussing the place itself, like Lindsay Wildlife Experience itself. Um, because it's not about that place, and also they want to be in control of their own media. um, but yeah, I just want it to be about the animals and what they're affected by.
That makes sense. That sounds like a really respectful and also like really great way to let yourself kind of process what's going on. Way of nature journaling it.
Yeah.
I remember earlier you'd been saying that there had been other habitat restoration or trash pickup work where you hadn't nature journaled, and and I have no judgment about that, but
Mhm.
I'm more like curious because I think that there's a lot of like, I know for me, it took me a while to figure out how to nature journal my stewardship work. So I'm curious, for you, why don't you nature journal it, or like have there been barriers that have been in your way to nature journaling it?
I think I'm just not focused. um, I like I think I'm so used to um hiking, or it's not necessarily that I'm not focused. I'm not a multitasker. So if I'm hiking or taking my dog for a walk, I'm not likely to nature journal because I have my dog with me. If I'm with other people hiking, I'm probably not going to be nature journaling because we're probably hiking, and so we're walking through a place, and I would just take a bunch of photos along the way. When we were doing the beach cleanup, I may have taken photos along the way, but again, it wasn't where I I felt comfortable enough to just sit down and just draw. And I think the other thing is I'm used to nature journaling from home from photos, and so um, I haven't really done a whole lot of outside nature journaling. When we go out, I love it. I love having this, like group experience and going out and actually journaling in the field. But I don't on my own. I don't do it very. I don't think I may have done it once or twice, like where I just sit back like on a bench and draw something really quick and then keep going because usually I'm with somebody. I think it's just like the fast-paced nature of our world, and like not everybody just wants to move on to the next thing. And so I haven't gotten the skill down of just being able to draw in like a 5-10 minute period of time and feeling like I could then move on and still retain the information. Even though saying that, when I was doing the California naturalist experience, I think I think there were just a few of us. I think there maybe been 2 or 3 of us that were actually journaling at the time, and it was really good practice to just be walking along. But I think the thing is that they were naturalists also, and so naturalists just don't move much more than a foot at a time because you were like, what's this? What's that? What's happening here? When you're with like-minded people, it was okay that they were all taking photos, a bazillion photos, because I could take that time to draw. Um, yeah, so I think it's just the who I'm surrounded by and the comfort level with like just sitting back and taking time versus let's move on to the next thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, being out with other people, a lot of what we do is dictated by what the rest of the people around us are doing. So
Mhm.
that's a really good point. And then also like what you said about pace, and it sounded like as well, task switching. Like if you've got one task that needs a ton of focus, then it can be harder to like suddenly change gears completely and kind of whip out the journal, especially if that thing is picking up trash, because then it's like you have to take off the gloves and you have to sit over here and draw. And so it's that momentum sometimes just says, let's just keep going. And
Mhm.
personally, I think that I think a lot of people prefer to nature journal from home, and I think that's totally fine and makes a lot of sense because first and foremost, the experience of nature journaling is for you. And
Mhm.
so if that's where that happens at home and that's what feels good, then that's perfect. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I'd really love to, and I'm hoping because I'm joining the you know Sierra foothills retreats. I'm hoping to hang out with a bunch of nature journalers and who are and just practice that skill of sitting down and drawing and being comfortable with just taking the time to do that, and hopefully being able to cultivate that practice.
Definitely. A secret, and this is coming from me who I've nature journaled a lot in the field. I'm still learning how to do that, especially when other people are around. I lose focus so easily when other people are around. My journal entries are like, I look at them and I'm like, I want to do better, but then I'm like, let's just accept it where it is for today, and it's fine. And we're just going to keep figuring out what we need to do next. And so, yeah, you're going to be in good company. a, lot, a lot of us may not say it out loud, but a lot of the rest of us are like, we don't know what we're doing either.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like everything else, just practice. Yeah, and I think, yeah, being with folks who are doing the same thing, it's sort of like, urban sketching going, there's an urban sketching group that I watch their posts, but I still haven't gone, who go out and, and they'll go urban sketching together. And again, it's sort of this planned time of, I'm going to go out there and we're going to be slow and we're going to sit down and we're going to draw this thing. And that's what we're going to do. Versus we're going hiking, and yes, you'll observe things along the way, but you're going to keep moving the entire time.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm going with a group who's chosen a bit of a slower pace.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah.
And then you're always welcome to come hang out with me if you'd ever want to go for a nature walk, and we can try to draw things and, lightly mumble about how this is really challenging at our together if you'd like. So I'd have
That
fun with
sounds great.
that. Excellent. One of the questions that I had, I know I asked this one later on, but if folks wanted to do your kind of stewardship in their own community, what would they need in order to do it?
So there are volunteer opportunities. I mean, if you wanted to actually work with animals, there are volunteer opportunities in pretty much every shelter. And Lindsay Wildlife trains up volunteers, and they always need more volunteers and more folks who are home carrying the little guys, or whatever. It depends on the skill that you have, but they also train you up for how to take care of these guys. Um, there's there's the possum crew, and then the squirrel crew, and the bat crew, and there's different people who have different skill levels and comfort levels with different things. Um, and yeah, if somebody feeds the reptiles, making sure that they don't go too long without eating. Yeah, so volunteering, um, either in the museum, if you're an educator or you want to be an educator and you want to take kids through the museum and walk them through the exhibits. There are volunteers in there at Lindsay, and there are also volunteers in the clinics that take care of the animals inside the clinic, and then there are the home care volunteers. So there's lots of volunteer opportunities. And then at local animal shelters, there's always a need for volunteers to walk the animals, to walk the dogs, volunteers to socialize cats, volunteers to take home foster babies, especially kittens and puppies. Yeah, so there's always room for more folks to get involved with fostering or walking or care of them, either on site or off.
So thank you. That's good to know that so many opportunities like that exist for people who want to help out.
Yeah, and I mean for habitat restoration, all of uh, the East Bay Park system has a full volunteer lineup, but also all of the little parks have like there's one where you can become like a steward of a specific location at Grover Park, which is up by the Claremont Hotel. And so they're doing habitat restoration over there. And you can just get a little plot of land and go whenever you want, or you can go on their volunteer days and help them with habitat restoration over there. And the last time I was there, they showed a hillside that they had completely cleared of ivy, of English ivy. And there were these absolutely gorgeous trilliums that were coming up for the first time. Yeah. Yeah, these giant trilliums, and they were stunning. They were just absolutely stunning.
That is so cool. Just because they uncovered that seed bank
Yeah,
and let, and let the ones who were there before the ivy just like say hi. That's so
yeah,
exciting.
yeah, yeah. So it was. I mean, I mean, the majority of the stuff was just removing the invasives, just so that the natives that are being crushed underneath could do their thing.
Is there anything else that you want to share, or any other thoughts that you have that I didn't like ask about that you'd want to talk more about?
Um, I just really love this project, and I love the idea of getting more information out there about stewardship. I think that I think some folks don't even know it's an option. Sort of like I didn't nobody really. I mean, I learned about naturalists when I was a kid. You know, I knew about Darwin, but I didn't. I thought of it as like an 1800 sort of thing. I didn't think of it as a current thing. And I didn't think that it could be a career or a job. Nobody ever presented it to me like this could be a career or a job. And I think that had that been presented, I may have been a naturalist versus a, I mean, I'm a California naturalist now, but I may have been a naturalist as a career versus a veterinarian. But you know, these things come when they're supposed to come. So um, I now know about it. But yeah, I think have letting people know that what stewardship is, all the different facets of it, and how people can get involved. Because I think that's the other thing is people don't necessarily know, even though we have, you know, the internet and databases, they don't necessarily know how to use those resources or where to look. Um, and I think getting, you know, if you're getting the information out there from different people all over the, you know, all over the place, that have entered into stewardship from different angles, then that gives different opportunities to people looking to do stewardship but don't know all of the different ways to enter, if that makes sense.
Completely makes sense. Or all of the different flavors that stewardship can take,
Mm-hmm.
just because there are so many different kinds of stewardship that are possible, and more than we even discuss, I'm sure. And so you're the third person I've interviewed, and so far all three of you have had completely different flavors of stewardship that have been
Hmm.
wonderful to hear about.
I'm super, yeah, now, yeah, I'm super curious to hear like all of these interviews and how they, what, yeah. That's the exciting part is, you know, I don't even know what all the different stewardship avenues are, and learning what those are, and maybe you know, discovering a new thing that you want to steward, a new way that you want to steward.
The next time people go by a side of a road and see a crew out there with bright orange tools pulling up a ton of French broom, or maybe they've already seen that. Maybe while you were out there, maybe a kid passed by in a car and they looked out the window and said, "That looks like fun."
Hmm.
So that, like, the way that you saw the paleontologist and thought, "Nah," some other kid though might see you and be like, "Ah."
Hmm.
And then, they
That's an option. Yeah, that's something that I could do.
that's possible, or
Yeah.
that looks like a fun tool to play with, or like, yeah, just knowing that we're all out there means that instead of naturalists or stewards or whoever being an 18th century thing, we're still very much present.
Hmm.
So that's my hope. My hope is to just make that option in all of you in the ways that you all do that shine.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, and that's a super admirable. I'm super excited to, yeah, hear more about it, and learn more about what people are doing. Yeah, so this is definitely, um, yeah, exciting.
Thank you for being part of this. I,
Yeah.
I know that we have also a lot of animal lovers in our community, so I can imagine a lot of people being very inspired by your story. I know I'm already very inspired by your story. I've always been a plant person, but you make me want to learn a lot more about the animals and all of their complexities. And plus, just like seeing your magic in person with the raccoon, that's going to stick with me forever.
Oh.